This episode of Around the Layout is brought to you by Highball Graphics. For over 25 years, Highball Graphics has been providing high-quality decals for railroads in New England, Canada, and beyond. With over 2,000 sets in scales N through G, Highball Graphics has you and your project covered. Highball Graphics specializes in custom decal orders, serving freelance railroads worldwide. Check out their easy-to-use website at highballgraphics.com or email them at info@highballgraphics.com. Discover prototypical track and turnouts with the Roadmaster series from Oak Hill Model Railroad Track Supply. Proudly made in the United States, Oak Hill's handcrafted turnouts provide unparalleled detail and accuracy, giving your layout museum-quality track work at an affordable price. Whether fully built or in easy-to-assemble kit form, Roadmaster provides all the details of real track. Looking for a custom piece of track work? Oak Hill can help with custom turnouts, diamonds, crossings, and more. Check out all of their offerings on their website, ohrtracksupply.com. Attention railroad fans! 1810 Designs is here to enhance the hobby with handcrafted works of art made just for you. From classic locomotive railheads to custom logos for your railroad, or maybe just good old railroad signs, they bring the spirit of the rails into your home, office, or train room. Visit 1810designs.com today and bring the railroad home. That's 18ten designs.com. ATLP Extra is our monthly newsletter delivered right to your inbox each month. Sign up for free at atlpextra.com.
ATLP Rewind.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Around the Layout, where model railroaders come to tell their story. My name is Ray Arnott. So glad you could join us. Joining me from Sebastian, Florida, John Farrington. John, welcome back.
Hey, Ray. Thanks for the invite.
Glad to have you back here. And it's been a while since we chatted, and there's been some pretty significant changes there in your model railroad world that we'll be talking about. Sounds like you hinted at it in the first episode, and now you have done it. You have gone to the freelance world, and certainly excited to hear your story about how you've created this railroad and everything else.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been about, maybe a year and a half. It's crazy what happens in a year and a half in the model railroad world.
Yeah, well, it's been a year and a half since you've been on the podcast, but certainly not a year and a half since I talked to you last. And we stay in touch, of course, through Don Iris as well. And you bailed me out of a project that I got myself into with an NS locomotive and helped me get that numbered up and did some really great weathering to it as well. It was an added bonus for the guy that asked me to do it. And I kind of got halfway through it and found out that I do a podcast weekly and trying to find time amongst everything else that I do. But you were kind enough to get me bailed out of that situation, and that thing looks awesome. And he was just absolutely tickled when he got that locomotive. So I appreciate you doing that. And then what else you've been doing some custom painting for Heath Hurwitz as well over at Humanity Junction.
Yes. Yeah. Good friend Heath. I kind of crashed one of his live streams one night on a work layover visit in New York, and we were having a good time messing around with the layout, and he showed me some future projects and stuff he wanted to do with some rolling stock. And I said, well, I'll take them home, but I kind of I work at a slow pace with that kind of stuff. I told him, I said, it may be a little while, but I promise I'll get them back to you. So he's got them now, and it looks like he's pretty happy with them.
Yeah, that's really cool. He did some custom Riverside transfer. I remember there was a caboose. Was there other rolling stock as well that you did for him?
Yeah, it started with the, actually before that trip, it started with 2 transfer cabooses or shoving platforms.
Right.
And that was a really neat project, especially for being maybe like an inch and a half long. Those things are really tiny.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was good. And once I got that one done, I saw the results and I said, man, let's do something else. So we did a box car and a locomotive, a GP30. The box car, which I was really proud of, and apparently it's going to be kind of a prototype of what he really wants to get maybe manufactured. So he's kind of showing it around to people, and yeah, it's a neat looking car.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then It's got to be, I mean, you did an awesome job with the HO locomotive. I can imagine N's still got to be a challenge though. Like you said, small
Oh
parts and
yeah.
yeah, you got to really polish up that dexterity there to, especially for decaling. I imagine that's quite a
Oh,
challenge.
I recently did a couple cars in my railroad, and I told Heath I'll send you one in N scale, and I actually found the same car prototype, the 2-bay hopper in N scale in microtrain.
Mhm.
So I had the decals made in N scale, and every single decal that is in HO is there in N scale. It's put just very, very tiny. So I told him, I said, pull out a magnifying glass. It's all there.
Yeah,
It's pretty
that's
cool.
awesome. Yeah, it's amazing they can print down to that too. You know, I mean, I'm amazed at the fine print that they get in HO, but to be able to do it in N scale is super wild. And I mean, now I mean Z scale is starting to get super detailed. So hopefully nobody, hopefully Heath sticks with N and not Z, because then you'll be really challenged. But that's really cool, and that's a great opportunity for you to work with Heath. Heath's a great guy and a great friend of the podcast as well. So
Oh yeah.
really cool to do that. And then, like you said, you were up at you were in the studio slash layout slash place that's got, I don't know, he's probably got more cameras than he does rolling stock in that room. But yeah, he has a lot of fun with his live streams.
Oh, his layout's coming along great, and I can't wait for him to get some, big operating sessions going on. I can't wait to visit that. That's going to be great.
What's neat to follow with Heath is that he hit a point where he wasn't happy with his layout, and then did what I guess the best advice that you could give somebody. And he took that, which is, if you don't like it, you're not in love with it, just get rid of it and
Yeah,
start over. And that's
absolutely.
exactly what he did. And really neat that with his live streams, you get to follow along. And, I find great humor in some of the stuff. And, watching him build a bookshelf was probably the most entertainment I've seen on YouTube in a while. And, that Easter night. And I put the comment that, today is Easter. Jesus was a carpenter, but Heath is not. And,
Oh, jeez, yeah,
and
yeah,
he'll be the first to tell you he's not a carpenter, but it's great that he takes on these projects and explores them. And he's really one of those guys that really goes in depth on his research too. So a lot of fun to watch that.
absolutely.
So let's get caught up with what you've been up to. And again, we hinted at the beginning of the show that you made a change with the previous layout. For those that may not have heard your first podcast, why don't you just tell us a little bit about your first layout and what that represented?
Okay, so several years ago, it must be like now 7 or 8 years ago, I got back into the hobby. Just the classic, no space. What am I going to do? I was in an apartment at the time, so I built a small shelf layout and just dove in, head first, just full on. Let's do this. Started doing custom, work on locomotives and cars, and I just really just caught the bug, and then started getting into ops. Even though it was a small layout, it still, I mean, it was great for me. It taught me so much, and kind of what we hinted at before is you need to start with something, because I guarantee it won't be your last. You have to start with something.
Right.
It was a great little layout. We moved to a new house, and unfortunately, the layout didn't make the move. I got rid of it, but it was for the best. I just wanted to start something new space, new design. So we started with the rail serve, continuing on from the first layout. And then our good friend Don Iris came into the picture, and I realized that there is a lot of fun to be had with others in an op session, and not just myself running some cars back and forth. So the layout was kind of tweaked a little bit. It was expanded. I'm now in my office slash workroom slash now second half of the layout, which has grown in the past year. I don't know if that happened. I don't think so since we last talked on the podcast, but it's almost doubled in size, and we've switched gears onto a freelance world.
Remind me about RailServe. That was actually a prototype railroad that you were kind of
Yeah,
proto freelancing a little bit, right? But it
yeah,
was more of a prototype than it was freelance.
yeah. In the real world, they mostly do like industry switching, right? There'll be a locomotive or a couple locomotives based at an industry, and they'll move the cars around. Uh, the plant or facility that needs a lot of moves throughout the day or night or whatever. So then they'll interchange with whoever their local carrier is. I kind of took that a little bit to a different in a different direction, and I kind of used it as switching multiple different industries. on this new layout, it still kind of worked with only a handful of industries. But once I started getting bigger and bigger, I said, nah, you know what? This doesn't make sense anymore. And I kind of want to do something different. And I kind of battled with, well, do I adapt my kind of made up world, into a prototypical, railroad, or do I kind of just start a freelance? And that's where it kind of came in. I just was like, you know what, let's just start something. I've always had this idea in my head of this freelance Somerset and Raritan. And I just, again, dove in, let's do it. So made the switch.
Talk about the name. Where did you come up with the name for it?
So I wanted it to be based, like, I grew up in Somerset, New Jersey, and some locals who are around that area may know there's an area in it's called in Boundbrook, the town of Boundbrook, and it's one of the few areas that you could see Conrail still.
Mhm.
Conrail Shared Assets owns some trackage there and a yard, and they operate pretty interesting operation. They still switch some industries in the area, and a lot of the industries that I am modeling on my layout is served by Conrail today. So I thought, you know what, let's kind of adapt this to Somerset being the town. The Raritan is the river that it runs along. Initially, it was going to be the Somerset Industrial, but then I feel that was still when it was going to be a small industrial park. But now it's kind of grown into this, I've got a yard, I've got several towns. So let's kind of expand it and make it the Somerset and Raritan.
Well, I'll tell you what, you did a great job with it. It just sounds really good together. It just
Thank you.
has a really cool, and and again, I think you're on your way to that ultimate pinnacle of freelance, which is when people think it's a real railroad and they start
Yeah.
Googling it and going, where is this thing? So
Yeah.
I think you've picked a great name that will help you get there. It's not overly complicated. It's very simple, to me, very railroady sounding, I guess, for lack of a better
Yeah.
term.
It's hard to do that. It's like when you come up with a railroad or you're freelance, you could pick anything. So it's hard to kind of dial that in.
Yeah, to keep it under control, right? To keep the realism without going too far over the top and crazy names or naming it after pets or family members or
Yeah.
those kinds of things that, start to become a slightly tacky. So it's really cool that you're able to come up with that. So talk about the logo, because I know somebody pretty well known to the podcast helped you with that, right?
Yeah, our good friend Scott Thornton helped me with that. Him and I have been talking about that for a while, and I think it was last summer. I was in somewhere in Europe for work, and I was sitting in my hotel, and I said, "You know what? Let's do this." So I started designing something, and I sent it to Scott, and I said, "Scott, I don't really know what I'm doing here. I'm not a graphic designer. Like, I'll pay you whatever you want to do here. Like, can you give
Yeah.
me some pointers?" And like 20 minutes later, he sends me back like this logo, and I'm like, "Oh, this is amazing." He like totally nailed it.
Yeah.
So we kind of ran with it from there with the big SR. He really was pushing the white. I actually wanted to keep them all red. He's like, "No, try this white, and it's going to weather nice." And that one GP10 I did is the white, and I kind of made that as if it's like the original paint scheme. So it's an older locomotive. It's got the red ends, kind of like the Sioux line with the big logo on the side.
Yeah, I think you've followed all the rules that I've heard. And, Lance Minheim is one that talks about it, about using, creating freelance paint schemes. Like, railroads were simple, right? They
Yeah,
didn't come up with keep your scheme simple. And you've done that, model it kind of after somebody's a little bit. There's only so many different paint schemes, and you've done a great job. And it's just it's a font driven logo,
yeah,
and it just looks super. And of course, Scott Thornton. I mean, he's phenomenal, like you said, phenomenal graphic design guy. I mean, you look at the book that he did for Railroad Model Craftsman, and
oh
it's
yeah,
just outstanding with tons of awesome graphics, and the art that he did in there is just outstanding. So. Yeah, that's really cool. So you've come up with this freelance thing, kind of made it your own, being able to, shape your railroad around what you want to model, which is super cool to that. What big changes happened on the layout as a result of this new railroad that's occupying it?
Well, so we now have a yard. It's a decent sized yard, enough to hold enough cars for the op session and interchange. That takes up a lot of room. I think that's kind of people don't understand how much room a real yard will take up, especially a double-ended, yard. Mine is kind of a stub-ended, but it does have a runaround. I had to do that just because of space. So that takes up maybe 60, 70% of the room is the yard. And then there's a little bit of space for another industry, or really just a transload area. But with this, we also got into some signaling, which was I just love signals. I don't know why. I like the colors. I like the lights. I like how they move. The lights change. I just always have been fascinated with signals. So I figure let's just do something here, very simple. And so again, I start out simple and end up going, dive in. So we've got some block detection. We've got a little simple panel through CATs, through JMRI. So it's controlled here. Just a couple control points, just enough to govern movement through the wall. As the layout goes through a closet, actually two closets. So there's about 7 or 8 feet in the wall that you can't access the layout. So we want to make sure there's not going to be any meats in there.
Right.
You could access it through the closet, but during op sessions, the closets are closed, and it kind of gives it that feel of distance. I think almost as if a helix would,
Yeah.
just that little bit of hidden area when you could walk into the other room. So the signaling has been fun. I still want to add a few more things. I think it's definitely expanding the operation opportunity. It slows things down. It allows some trains to move, people to do some switching in certain areas, and other people have to wait, and they could follow the signals.
I think that's important, even on small layouts. I do it with my small switching layout using track warrants, but even with signaling is that control aspect of saying, no, you can't stretch your train across this entire thing to do this. You have this area to work in, and it certainly helps with smaller layouts, because on a bigger layout, you still have to have that control, but you've got more room. Now it makes it feel bigger when you have that kind of control.
Yeah, we've been actually. Don came over recently, and I was like, Don, all right, I want to put in these pinch points during the session where it kind of restricts people from, just like you said, you need to do a runaround. You kind of have to think about it, because the layout's set up very simple. Everything is there's no tricks in the track work. So it's pretty simple. And with simple kind of gets a little bit of fast sometimes in the op session. And I kind of want to slow it down a bit. So we come up with a few little rules of don't go past this point on this track, and kind of little bit of some restrictions, and that seems to help a little bit slow down the session, and it adds a little bit of fun too. I gave Don the difficult job with the most restrictions, and he said, "Don't change a thing." So I guess it's good enough.
That is the seal of approval right there for sure. Don't change a thing. It does help though. I mean, and again, you've got a layout that's actually bigger than mine, but it's still in that small layout category of, the things you have to do to, you want to be able to include ops, but you have to have these things that really slow it down so it doesn't get consumed all quickly, right? And small things, slow running locomotives, and like you said, just simple rules and quirks and those kinds of things that help do that. What have you found to be like the most useful kind of new thing that you've added that helps slow ops down?
Well, the first half of the session, I've been trying to plan it so people aren't bunched up together. So it's 2 rooms. Each room is about, 11 by 12. So it's all around the walls. No peninsula. So the middle of the floor is open.
Yeah.
So I try to have the jobs. I'm trying to work the jobs that are kind of catty corner to each other.
Yeah.
But that also, you want to make sure that no one needs to use common track work, since let's be honest, the rooms aren't that big. When you're working with even a train that's over 6-8 cars, that starts to add some serious length, and you start pulling cars and your train grows and grows. So we kind of came up with a few rules of, if you're on this job, you want to use, the the siding as your lead. Whereas if you're doing this job on the other end of the room, you're going to use the main as your lead when you're pulling cars. And that seemed to work really well, where there was nobody kind of interfering with each other. And that also helps with, you're not talking to the other person. Again, it makes it feel like you're in a completely different area.
Right.
Instead of looking at each other's trains like, hey, watch out, you're going to hit me. It's kind of just seamlessly moving. So we tried that, and it seemed to work pretty well. So that's a pretty big one.
Yeah, that is a challenge and something to think about when you're doing layout design, is exactly that. And it's funny that I've seen at least a few that have tried their darndest to set up an ops scheme where you keep everybody away from each other, and yet they all still end up all in the same spot at the same time. So
exactly.
But it is something to think about. And the other part is, staggering your industries enough so that people aren't on top of each other and spacing them out well. And it sounds like that's been on your mind as you're making changes to this.
Yeah, big time. And also the session is split up into half. So the first half, the other two, whoever's operating in the other room, someone's here in the yard. But the second half, we kind of added an interchange. So previously, I had an interchange track here in the yard where whoever was running the yard would just shove cars into the interchange track. At the end of the op session, the cars come off, new cars come on. Now we've kind of added where, kind of in this area, prototypically, Norfolk Southern and CSX have access to the Somerset and Raritan. So we're coming up with, okay, this is going to Norfolk Southern, this is going to CSX. So you have to now break up the interchange. And throughout the session, towards the tail end of it, we actually are now going to try to run a CSX train through the entire layout into the yard. And then we'll interchange and then come all the way back out. So it really puts a damper on things for the guys still running jobs in the other room, because now they have to, clear off the main, make sure everything's clear on the sidings. And we could see that now on the panel with JMRI and CATS, and align the signals, align the tracks for the CSX guy to come in, do the swap, and then go back out. So that was pretty cool. We tried that. I think if it sounded like it worked well, which unfortunately means I'm going to have to build a little bit more bench work for room for the interchange, but that's okay. A door may have to come down, a few minor things, but that's okay. I think it's going to work out well.
Got any more closets to sacrifice there, John?
Yeah. Unfortunately, Don always says, these two closets are kind of useless for me because they're both my train room. Don goes, you should just knock that wall down between the closets. And I'm like, Don, I've thought of that many times. And he keeps bugging me to do it. Who knows? He might be coming over with a sledgehammer and we might be taking that wall down, because it would, if we could walk through room to room through the closet area, we could now continue the layout around a bunch more of the room. So yeah,
he's a bad influence. I don't know if you figured that out yet. Yeah. And he'll start to, he keeps asking me, he'll say it from time to time. He'll be like, you talked the wife into moving her stuff out of the basement yet? I'm like, no, I'm not there yet, Don. But why don't you come over and talk to her? I think you ought to come over and have the conversation. Yeah,
exactly.
But no, it's good. He's very encouraging, and and that's what he'll say. I tell him about something I want to do, and his response is, "Go do it." So yeah,
that's right.
That's for sure. And then you're doing it. You're expanding. You're adding. So with all this JMRI and CATS and stuff, so are you dispatching your layout? How does that work during an op session?
Well, we've only had a couple sessions with the panel. So far, I found whoever was doing the yard could kind of dispatch, because it's only moving a few things here and there. But now, as we kind of maybe play with this CSX interchange, expanding the detection and the turnout control, it may make sense to maybe do it, like have somebody remotely do it, which would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
A big thought, a consideration that I'm having now is having the yard job being done remotely, like the operator or engineer be remote. Have some cameras set up here where they could run it through a I forget what it's called, that real VNC where they have access to my computer
Yeah.
and they could pull up the JMRI throttle and actually run the yard job and have somebody in here as the conductor and then talk to each other and just for fun. I don't know. It's a thought. I think it'd be pretty cool since most of the movements are just kind of back and forth, sorting cars and so on. And my one locomotive that runs the yard is an actual RCO unit that I built with the strobes and everything. So I was like, it would make sense. He actually is remote.
Yeah,
So,
that would definitely, it would be a lot more realistic. That's for sure. And yeah, it's just a neat way to tie people in and add more people without physically putting them in the room, which is neat. We talked about that on the episode with Don about, remote dispatching, and, it kept Ed involved, the gentleman that was dispatching his Situate layout. And now it keeps Don involved with us up here in the tri-state group. And you certainly could add another person into the mix, or, I'm sure Don's not going to want to do it when he's got a layout just down the road from him. He's coming over to operate, but I'm sure
maybe we get Mark to do it.
Yeah, you get Mark, Eric to do it, or heck, I may even take a swing at it from time to time. So yeah, it's a really cool concept to be able to do that. And then, remote operations is something I've never ventured into, but certainly is a neat concept to think about.
I mean, if I could get maybe 2 cameras at kind of like a wide angle of the room, I mean, you're communicating with your conductor on where to go and what to do, and you guys both have your paperwork in front of you, so you could talk through the moves and stuff. I don't know. It might be fun. It might be not fun. I don't know. We could try it and see if it works, and go from there.
I've tried kind of a sort of remote, but still there. When I've done 2-man crews at certain layouts, if I'm the engineer, I try not to watch what the conductor's doing and just kind of listen to him. And I think it adds a new element when he's got to okay, he'll tell me, count down to a couple, and then, okay, stretch it out. And then you do all that and pretend that you're facing forward, and maybe you're, an eighth a mile away or something, or 1,000 feet away or whatever. And you can't see what's behind you. And it really neat. And then you really force the idea when you take them and put them who knows how many miles away and operating. Really kind of makes that realistic.
Yeah, it would be neat. I think we're gonna have to try it, and we'll report back.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's a great idea. So let's go back to talking about the paint jobs on your Somerset and Raritan locomotives. So you talked about an earlier scheme that was more like the Sioux line. What else has that developed into?
So I've got one larger 4-axle, which is the GP10, which is the white unit. And then I've really kind of started the layout. I'm a big fan of switchers, so SW1500s, the 1200s. So I've got 2 SW1500s that I'm working on right now. I've been working on for over a year, but they'll be done eventually. They're the solid red, bright red. Very much like the what is it? The Vermont Railway? Is that what it is up there with those bright red locomotives with the white chevrons on the front? I just love it.
Yeah.
So I kind of took that idea with the pilots having the chevrons, bright red with the white lettering, the white roofs, the SW1000, which is the RCO unit, which is complete. That has the same paint scheme, but it's a little dirty. But the 2 other ones that I'm working on now are the same bright red.
That's cool. It looks really good, and it looks good on some of those covered hoppers I see floating around as well.
Yes. So I started to do those. Originally, were going to be for a Christmas gift to some friends, but life gets in the way. It took longer than expected. So I'm still building a few more. In theory, they're kind of on my railroad. They'd be used for salt.
Okay.
Other railroads could be used for whatever they like, but they're just 2-bay ACF hoppers from AccuRail.
Okay. Yep.
So I purchased a bunch of the undecorated kits and just painted them up, decals, and away they go.
Have they hit the point of rust yet where they're almost more orangey brown than they are gray?
Yeah, a few of them are going to be actually. Don's is sitting here on my desk. It's back from his layout. He said, "Hey, what can you dirty that thing up for me?" So I'm going to give it the treatment. But yeah, the reason with them hauling salt, they're going to be kind of
Oh
rusty.
yeah.
So
Yep.
that's the plan, is to rust a few of them up.
Yeah, I've got one bunch that I have to do. I did some of the two bay Walther's mainline in GNWR, Genesee and Wyoming, because they haul calcium chloride out of Rochester, New York to here in Plainfield. They bag it for ice melt. And
Oh
for
yeah.
somebody it's in Florida, ice melt is what you put on ice
Oh
when it
yeah.
freezes. I know that only happens maybe once in a lifetime for you guys, but no, so I have that modeled on mine, and it's exactly that. You see these hoppers out here, and they're just absolute rust buckets, which is
Yeah.
probably a blast for you to do, because that heavy weathering's got to be a joy to be able to create.
Yeah, I do enjoy the heavy weathering, but at the same time, I like to do some simple stuff as well. But I think those hoppers are going to get pretty beat up whenever I get around to building some for myself. They'll be pretty dirty and rusty.
Yeah, you can't give them all away. You got to keep some for
Ah,
yourself there, John. As much as you're a very generous man, you have to keep a few for yourself and keep that railroad with salt moving on it.
That's right. That's right.
So you said a couple shakedown sessions to the layout. How many guys can you have running the layout?
I think the most we've had was four operators, which was a little tight. Not so much with space, but just things got done really quick, and it was kind of like, what's next? So I think if I limit it to three, with a fourth maybe being the dispatcher or kind of like an oversee uh, floating conductor or something, is nice to have to help. Um, I think that's kind of the sweet number there. So like three people running trains, and maybe a fourth as a dispatcher slash floater.
I know that you recently started sharing this out, and we'll put the links in for your Facebook page that you just created, and I'm checking out. There's also a switcher you got here in black, and even the black looks super cool. That what you've done
Oh
there.
yeah, that's that was a Norfolk Southern unit that I did many years ago. I did the ditch lights, the keep alive, and the sound. And um, as we started operating, I was like, man, I need a lot more power. So I was like, it's getting patched. So it got a black patch job, and it's now for the Somerset and Raritan. But yeah, it looks good with a good contrast with the black.
I'm also seeing here on that page we talked about earlier about ideas to slow down operating sessions, and you did an excellent job with your control panels, and then you added keys to them. And talk a little bit about how that all that works.
So the key is very simple. All it does, it's a circuit, basically almost like an on-off switch. So when the key is on, the circuit is completed, and you can use the button on the panel to move the turnout. When the key is off or removed, the circuit is not complete, and you cannot use the button. So a few jobs we have where there's a lot of not a lot, but a lot of action through the turnout, where you have to be moving the turnout. And instead of calling the dispatcher every time, you could grant local control to the crew, and they could move the turnout, which I'm pretty sure that's a prototypical thing as well. Some turnouts or switches are designed where they could be thrown both manually and by the dispatcher. Here on the railroad, we do that, and it's pretty cool. So it prevents people from cheating. If they're doing a job where they shouldn't really be using that turnout, they should be calling to have it switched. Whereas a couple jobs where you're granted or you're given a key, it comes with your paperwork, and now you could have access to the turnout.
Yeah, that's really neat. It's just again, just more interactive ability in the layout. I think that's really cool to be able to do that. I just love to be able to interact with a fascia, right? Like
Yeah.
have buttons to push or switches to throw. I've got a crossing on mine that I could easily set up for detection, but I'd rather have it where you pull up and manually turn on the crossing and it was actually to satisfy a 5-year-old neighbor who used to come over. He could at least have something to play with on the fascia. But this is
Yeah.
really good, and I love super clean. And you've done this like super clean, like nice
Yeah.
graphics, easy to read, just really nice stuff here that you've
Thank you.
done.
Yeah. Thanks. I actually just, I think I did them in paint.net, which is that free paint software or that online software. I did them in paint.net and, bought some cheap sticker paper. I put the sticker paper on a piece of styrene.
Yep.
And then I took some really thin plexiglass and cut that out to the same size, and put it together. And it came out pretty nice. I'm happy with it. I still have a few more to make, and they take some time. So I need to get back into groove and knock those out and be done with it.
Yeah, they definitely, creating the lines and making sure everything and putting all that together is certainly a task. But you've done an excellent job with that. We'll make sure we share those pictures in the show notes when the episode releases, because super nice. And then I wanted to ask you, because this kind of tickles my own interest, because I'll be looking to build a warehouse. And I see that you've done a warehouse for Home Depot distribution, and you used brick sheets from Monster Model Works. Tell us about that, because my goodness, that thing came out looking great. So tell us about that build.
Yeah, their brickwork is beautiful. They've got a lot of sheets just for supplies. They've got brick, they've got masonry stone, they've got cracking concrete, all kinds of cool stuff. They've got they offer it in different thicknesses. So I kind of got the thicker stuff. I think it's 1/8 inch. So I didn't have to support it very much, but it is supported in the back. And I had that stuff for about a year before I actually, said, all right, I'm going to do this, because I was scared, because I've never really painted anything like that before. I wasn't sure. What really got me going was Joey from Late Night Modeling, or I think that's his handle. He's got these new kits out, small little structures, very common basic buildings that can be used in almost any application. So I built one of his kits, and I kind of built some confidence in how to paint this stuff. And I said, all right, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do the Home Depot. I've been talking about doing it for over a year. So I just, painted it. I think I ended up doing using rattle can spray to kind of tint it, just light coats. And then I came over it with a matte clear, and then I just weathered it with some washes, some dark washes, just to kind of bring out the brickwork. And it came out pretty nice. I'm happy with it.
Yeah, I would be happy too if it's excellent. And talk about how that industry works.
So, Home Depot distribution is that's a real facility in New Jersey. It's in Edison, New Jersey, and it's actually on another really kind of neat railroad is the Raritan Central. It's a small industrial railroad out there, which again is kind of near where I grew up. And I found it randomly, and I said, "Wow, what a neat industry!" It's got, they've got the warehouse for boxcars. So the real one could hold probably, I don't know, 6 or 8 bays for the larger high cubes. And then they've got this large section of concrete pad for the center beams. Okay. So I've kind of incorporated that. I've got the one side is for the warehouse, and then to the right, the other side has got the pad where you could bring in a couple center beam cars.
Yeah, I like this. The idea of doing an industry with multiple spots on it, and there's just so many opportunities there to, put some directions. Certain cars go with certain doors.
Yeah,
thinking about ways of, smaller layouts and the things that we have to think of to try to just, it could be just as easy. You could say, okay, dump 2 cars here. Yeah. But for small layouts, you gotta stretch it a little bit, and these are all opportunities to stretch it. And what a great simple backdrop building that you've created here using those sheets, and it looks outstanding. And I may be stealing a little bit. I think there's 80% of art is stealing, so I'm just going to let you know ahead of time, because that's an excellent industry. I'm looking to build a little 1 turnout layout behind me here in the studio, and I definitely want to do a warehouse, and that's definitely the idea. I would have something like that. So I'll be definitely checking out Monster there and seeing what they've got for sheets, and then checking it out. And then you mentioned Joey. Joey stopped by our booth. Joey's at Late Night Hobbies.
Hobbies. That's it.
Yeah. And he's got a great structure and some great components along with it. This great little building that you're using for your suburban propane location is just a really neat Craftsman kit. Talk about learning and building that.
Yeah, I can't wait to build this scene because I went crazy and bought so many detail parts and propane tanks and trucks and flatbed trucks. And I'm going to build a really neat scene there using that structure. And it's almost perfect. Like I found a prototype picture of a suburban propane dealer, and it's almost the same with the brick on the front, the concrete blocks on the side. I'm going to 3D print the sign. But Joey's kit, very, very simple. And you want to talk about a confidence booster to build some of these craftsman kits. That's the kit. And for the price, you can't beat it. I can't recommend it enough. I'm going to work on a nice video about the structure, the build, and doing kind of the added detail that you could do to a kit like this. And it should come out really nice. Again, I haven't finished it yet, but I'm pretty sure it's going to look good.
Amherst was a whirlwind for me, so I apologize for not remembering exact details, but I know Joey did bring over a couple samples, and I was looking at him. I was like, can I have this? And he's like, well, no, it's just a sample. I'm like, holy mackerel, this is great. And he had like similar type buildings that he was showing, and I was just like, yeah, this is a winner. This will definitely be a winner, and it sounds like you agree.
Oh, yeah, he's got a few different options. What's funny is the kit that you see that I built, the smaller one, is actually something he kind of built, not for me, but he had a larger one. And I said, Joe, I really want to put this here in the foreground structure, but the other one's just a little too big. He's like, all right, let's shrink it. And he made it kind of smaller. And it's like, oh, this is perfect. It's like the perfect small little dealer with an office and a warehouse connected to it. And it should be perfect.
Did all the other parts come with it? The doors, windows,
Doors, windows. Yep. Everything you see from those photos that I posted came with the kit.
Oh, that's awesome. We'll share a picture of this in the show notes as well. And, it's just absolutely perfect. It's screaming for a sign above the door. It's got that perfect spot to put whatever, if you want to put a freelance propane or if you got a real logo. Yeah, it's absolutely perfect. And it's exactly like, they would, maybe possibly pull a truck in that bay, do some light service work on it, PM stuff on there, a mom and pop propane company up to a branch of a bigger propane company. And it's funny because that's the business that I'm in. I sell to these people, and that you're absolutely right. That is a building that looks like a propane terminal. So
yep.
excellent job by them. That's a super kit and super simple. It looks to build and a lot of fun too. So awesome.
Yeah, great.
And then you're painting trucks. I see you got an MOW truck, and you did a beautiful job with that. Is that something that you 3D printed, or is that something you purchased?
No, that was a Shapeways find.
Okay.
The Mad About Cars, that guy. I don't know how many cars, probably thousands of vehicles, but I found it on there, and because I remember seeing those. I don't know where that bright yellow came from with Conrail, but that truck was around my area when I was a kid, and I used to see it. Maybe not that exact model, but one of those bright high vis yellow paint jobs. So I saw that kit on Shapeways, and I said, I got to buy this, and I may just make it a Conrail truck. And then once the Somerset and Raritan was born, I said, let's just patch it. We'll patch it to that and say that it came along with the territory.
It reminds me of the color that the insurance companies convinced a multitude of fire departments to paint their trucks in the 70s because they felt that was like a much safer color than, red or whatever else was being run. So you see a bunch of fire departments that, into the 80s and 90s and some even into the 2000s had this, and some of it's stuck. They just have gone with that safety yellow or safety green or whatever color you want to call it. But yeah, it's funny. That was an insurance driven thing in the 70s. I think they actually saved money on their insurance policies by painting them that color. So,
jeez.
So yeah, kind of reminds me of that. But yeah, awesome job. And, just the detail work. Here's another thing that you have in here with that, talk about slowing down operations is adding derails to your layout. And it looks like you've been working on adding the former Scotty's, I guess the Scotty Heritage derail from Macrail. So talk about that and where you end up putting those.
Yeah. So that, That is the entrance into the transload area that's in the yard. I've got two. I've got a Venezia. I think that's how you pronounce it. It's a company owned transload facility on the layout. It's the biggest industry on the layout. And then I've got one that's technically owned by the railroad in yard limits, and we've got an unloader for the dry bulk or salt, and a little team track that anything could come up and get unloaded. But for unloading on the unloader, the salt unloader, the cars have to be moved. So I kind of built I actually saw it here locally, a front end loader with a coupler on it, and that's how they move the cars over the unloader. So I figured if that's probably going on, I don't know the rules of this, but I'm pretty sure if they're moving cars, there needs to be a derail before it goes out onto the main in case there's a runaway or something. So it's the perfect spot for it. I did add that little sign. They come with some signage from MacRail, so I kind of came up with a little hinged sign, and I'm actually working on. I haven't done it yet, but it should work in theory. I have one of the little sensors from Iowa Scale, and I think I've got it where when I flip the derail to unlock the derail, it will cover the little sensor and it will turn off the blue light I'm going to have on the fascia.
Oh
So
man.
it'll be an added kind of like, because it's in a tough spot. It's kind of over my workbench where if you're not really paying attention, you may not even see that it's there. So I want to put that plate on the fascia, the derail with a bright blue light. So hopefully someone will see it. But I think it'd be cool that once the derail is off or unlocked, that the light will go out. So we're gonna try it.
I see that's not the only one that you've put on your fascia as far as lights. It looks like you've added a signal to the fascia in what's it, Piscataway?
Oh yeah, Piscataway. Yes,
Piscataway, yeah, yeah.
So the one signal is kind of hard to see, and like many people have done, I've seen this on many layouts with this repeater, kind of on the fascia, where you don't have to sneak your head around a layout and against the wall to see the signal. It's
Right.
just right there on the fascia. So,
But just
that's
so
what that
cleanly
is.
done, John. You're doing such an outstanding job of, finish is so important, and it doesn't take a whole lot. You don't have to be a master carpenter, and you don't have to be, but just some thought into the finish, and the way you're doing it is just it's so clean. So
Yeah,
keep,
thank you. I
keep,
appreciate
keep
it.
up, keep up the great work. You're doing an outstanding job.
Thank you.
Another thing I noticed that you did that another great idea, and just sharing as I'm making observations off of the Facebook page that everybody should definitely go and check out. And again, we'll share a link in the episode notes. Your use of the overpass to hide where you're passed through is just
Yeah.
another really smart idea. And it's simple, but it's just another great thought. How do you hide, the fact that there's a hole in the wall? Right.
Yeah.
And you've done a great job with that. Talk about where that idea came from.
Well, that prototypically that would be Route 287 in New Jersey. So there technically would be an overpass there, um, and it kind of made sense to kind of help cover the hole in the wall. Um, yeah, it started out as what is it? The Rick's products, I believe. They sell that overpass kit.
Right.
So I used that for the road structure, and then the abutment pillars are 3D printed. I just randomly came up with a design on the computer and just 3D printed a huge chunk of resin. I was going to build it out of wood and build it out of or styrene or something, and I was away at work, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to design this on the computer. I'm going to get home. I'm going to plug it in and just let it print it. So that's what I did, and just weathered it up. Painted it.
Yeah, it looks awesome. Looks, again, very well done. And you said it earlier, and want to re-highlight it, that with the overpass and it passing through the closet, it makes a smaller layout feel a lot bigger when it disappears. And even for mine, I've got a small tunnel, and I just wanted it to disappear even if it's just for a few seconds, just to make it go away and come back. Yeah, it gives that extension, and it really kind of breaks up and makes the areas feel more distant to each other too. So yeah, that's definitely something to think about, especially with small layouts. Make the train disappear for a little bit, find a way, sneak it behind something, hide it behind backdrop. There's just a multitude of different ways, but you figured out. I mean, the closet seemed to be almost a necessity because you wanted to gain more real estate in the house for it. But yeah,
We went through the walls going into the closet, and I was so nervous because the studs with the closet being so close to the wall, the studs are so close. And I was like, oh no, I hope it's like not too, I hope I could fit a track. Ideally, I wish I could fit a double track, but again, the single track splits everything up. It slows things down. So I guess it's kind of a blessing that it can only fit one track through the studs.
no room in your backyard for a shed, is there?
Ugh. Yeah, it'd be tight. I've thought about it. Trust me.
I'm sure the guy down the road has also thought about it too. And but no, that's great. You're making good use of the two rooms in your home and being able to combine it and put the layout that you have in there.
Yeah.
I'd be remiss, this other picture too, and I'm again guess the pictures here on your Facebook page, but this yard office that you built out of a trailer.
Oh yes.
Did you? One, outstanding again, your ability to do scratch building, and then obviously the weathering that comes along with it that just brings the realism out. Did you have a prototype that you were, or is this kind of like in your
No,
mind, or
I
how
did.
that?
It's a prototype. It's a friend of mine, Tom Holly. He worked at a paper mill, and that was their yard. And he has a few prototype photos. I can't share them. I think they're going to get used in some other, maybe some publications. So I don't want to share them,
Yep.
but you could look at that and you may be able to put two and two together. But no, Tom shared these photos with me a few years ago, and he said, "Hey, this would be a great, yard office is perfect. Just like a trailer with they built a porch on the front out of wood. And once I build that scene, there's a few other little structures around. There's benches, there's chairs, there's ice chests. It's the perfect little yard office. So for Tom, I told him I'll leave an initial his initials in the chair, which it is on the prototype. So he'll get a kick out of that.
This kind of highlights a conversation I had in the previous episode with Lance Minheim. We're talking about a mistake that some modelers make, which is you want to have beautiful, breathtaking scenes in your layout and this and that. But when it comes down to it, especially railroads that you're emulating, these switching operations, they're not running by the prettiest of areas, and they're not the most breathtaking. They're very much very dirty, grungy kind of places. And this yard office, this, basically a mobile trailer, it screams that, right? It's just, it's rusty, it's dirty, it's, it's not the most pleasant, and probably inside isn't the most, clean environment. It's probably a little ratty inside. But that's exactly where these places are. And this is exactly what it is. They're not clean, brand new, freshly painted buildings. They're this.
Yeah, that's a scene I really am looking forward to do as well. But again, it's like, it's so close to the track work in the yard. I've changed my mind. That's another thing that's kind of been delaying a lot of the scenery is I keep changing my mind on these little decisions like, do I want to move this? Do I want to move that? And we all know, who's ever built a layout or who has put down ballast, that you kind of want to do those things before you start laying ballast. So
yeah, for sure. I still say the mark of a true model railroader is when you take a look at where the track used to be and you can see the shadowing of when they've painted. I said, that's a mark of a true, because they've moved the track, something, they laid it here, painted it. Oh, nope, it's going to get moved. And you can see all the spots it used to be. But yeah, that's all part of the ebb and flow. And a good reason to do what you've done, run some shakedown sessions and, check and make sure this stuff works before you dive into really locking everything in, because seemingly nothing will kill momentum more than just rework after rework of detail work like that.
Yeah, it's inevitable, but if you could, eliminate a large chunk of it, it helps.
For sure. Well, John, it has been an absolute blast having you here on the podcast and talking about all this. I have to get myself down to Florida because there's at least 2 layouts that I need to see in person.
Absolutely.
And looking forward to eventually being able to do that. Until then, again, John, thanks again for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Around the Layout. Learn more about today's episode, check out past shows, and much more on our website, aroundthelayout.com. Show your support by becoming an operating crew member at aroundthelayout.com/crew. Follow us on social media, aroundthelayout.com/social. And send us your feedback, aroundthelayout@gmail.com. Thanks for hanging out with us around the layout.